Good day, I'm Bob Watchorn, as already noted, and I've been a geologist since 1971 and worked underground first in Tasmania in 1968. Always been interested in research, and so I'm going to give a talk tonight on some work I've been doing since about 1998, and just the last 3 months I've got all interested in seismic tomography, and so most of this work I've just done has just been, the last half of this lecture has just been done in the last 3 months. Pretty much all of it is new to geologists, and I'll be very interested to see if anyone can produce plans like these plans I'm about to show you, because I have never seen anything like this in any of the published research. I'll be delighted if people can prove me wrong. So I'll start off very similar to the lecture I gave in 2013, which was on giant impact structures, and I got a heap of rubbish, I guess one might say, after that for calling them impact structures instead of giant ring structures. Well, I'm going to start off with giant impact structures because these structures are very definitely impact structures. So the impact rock that came down, people say, just off the cuff, 20 kilometres diameter, doesn't sound much, but you think of something coming in at 35,000 kilometres an hour at minus 100 degrees temperature and 15 to 30 kilometres diameter. So Mount Everest, halfway up this giant impactor, that's what you've got to keep in mind. Tallest mountain on Earth is only half the height of the thing that comes in and creates these giant impacts. And down the bottom here, counterintuitively, these giant impacts cause energy loss, not gain, ultimately in the impact zone. And so they actually cool the impact zone and form the deep solid lithosphere, which I'll go into a little bit later during the talk. So a bit of myth busting will be in the talk. So why is the Yilgarn craton 300 kilometre thick Hadean lithosphere formed during the late heavy bombardment? Why is it still there? The general consensus amongst geologists around the Earth is that there's almost no greater than 4 billion year old rocks on Earth. My take on it, and you'll see during this talk, is that there's huge amounts of it down underneath. And why couldn't the giant ring structures surface geology be seen using all of our technology? Why can't they still be seen? What is the Yilgarn's structural geology, geochronology and mineralisation from the surface to 300 kilometres depth? What is it? Nobody really seems to know. Glass Earth's been going for 10 years now, and I still haven't seen any pictures of it. And especially in pictures that I understand, which are plans and sections. And the final part of the talk will be how can we be better at mineral targeting, which is the prime objective of pretty much most economic geologists. Really, we've got to think outside the box. Could have been thinking inside the box for so many years. And our discovery rate is just falling behind our production. So I've been looking at ring structures almost on my little lonesome, I think, for about the last 20 years. And I've found these ones that are actually shown here all over the Yilgarn. I can show you, I've written about 37 papers on them. I've had 78 100,000 visitors on my website and lots of really interesting comments. So take a look. And the next image is of the Watchorn giant ring structure or impact structure up near Leonora. The central area is enhanced Landsat. Amazing what you can do with Landsat. Just that bland looking thing you see on the television every night, you can bring out structures like you wouldn't believe on that. And the rings that are shown there are the various rings that you can see on those pictures around the edge. So up on the top there, that's topography. Hopefully you can see a ring structure there. The second one down is what started a lot of this ring structure work. I did a PhD for a couple of years at University of Western Australia, and in the end the only ring that I could get them to see was this ring here. The number C is using Landsat with strong structural enhancement. There's actually a mixture of rings there, but we'll be looking at that in a bit of detail in the next couple of slides. The W in each case is, you probably can't see that, is the actual centre of the ring. The D is radiometrics, and E is the horizontal derivative of gravity, which effectively I did that using ER Mapper in 1998, and it fell out of I was giving a lecture to Western mining geophysicists, and suddenly as I was talking about where all the gold should be, I saw this great big dartboard looking at me, and so that was what started my interest in ring structures. F is the satellite gravity, G is gravity of the centre of the ring, and H is the magnetics of the centre of the ring. This is Landsat, as I said, what you see on TV each night. There's a couple of large rings there, the Kalgoorlie round to the western side up to Wiluna, and one running outside of Tropicana and through Gruyere. Even though with the enhancement, you're actually really just enhancing the main structures. Geographically, it's still good, because anyone who's ever worked around St Ives and that, you can see St Ives, Kambalda, and you can see the lake pit sitting in between. And that's just in a little corner down there. And I've checked over the whole thing, and basically it's not distorting it. This slide shows a bit of the evidence on the surface and in section for the ring structure. So the Meekatharra ring is 800 kilometres in diameter, and it's best seen down in the southeast half, around there, and the Kalgoorlie-Wiluna ring is best seen up in this half, around there. So almost you never see all the rings like you do on the moon in perfect circles. You've got to go to lots of different databases and piece it together. Seismic section near Tropicana, up there. That shows major, right where the ring should be. So this ring coming around here basically shows major structures, arcuate structures going through, some coming up through to the top of the crust and other ones stopping below the top of the crust. The tomography research, I've looked at 75 kilometres down to 300 kilometres down, and also 3 orthogonal sections. So definition of seismic tomography really is just looking at differences in rocks using many iterations between different samples beside each other. And you can get the different depths by measuring the time elapse from the earthquakes when it gets back to the surface. Resolution, the current resolution of Geoscience Australia is about 100 kilometres in the smallest dimension, and that was from blew it in on a LinkedIn post in 2018. I've managed to get down to about 5 kilometres to 20 kilometres resolution, and this structural detail enables the timing relationships to be resolved to give a 4D model. So it's opening up a whole new world of interest and opportunity. And the actual image, I guess you'd say, that actually got me interested in all this was this one here, which is a tomography image of Australia. And I thought, well, and that was from Blewett in 2018. And I said, gee, that looks very much like the mares on the moon. And so I used the imaging techniques that I'd developed over the previous sort of 15 years on this image, and ended up with a series of circles, and looked like a big S, but when you actually look at it, it actually resolved into a series of giant rings, sort of up to 1500 K in diameter. And when you look at the moon, very similar dimensions. And so the moon's craters were actually formed by the late heavy bombardment, which was when Saturn and Jupiter swapped orbits at 4.1 to 3.8 billion years ago. And sprayed planets and things all over the central solar system, and basically huge projectiles came down and bombed the moon. Well, the moon didn't get covered over the top again because there weren't any more projectiles after that. On Earth, it caused huge volcanism. So our main crust building time is from 4 to about 3 billion years. So they all got buried on Earth. Just a little bit on seismic tomography. Uses earthquake waves in the, so about 1,300 stations all the way from Christmas Island and Macquarie Island and way up to New Guinea and Australia in the middle. They cross-reference all the earthquakes and gives you a 3-dimensional picture at any depth, any section, depending on how you slice it, that you actually can get. And so the other plans there effectively at various depths. This is just stuff I picked up off the net. Fishwick and Rawlinson in 2012. So all of the work, this next lot of work that I'm going to show you has come from that little diagram there, and basically most of the second half is just from the West Australian section. That's all I started with. So when I did the enhancement, I ended up with a very detailed structure by comparison to what it came from. To put you on scale, well, West Australian borders, you know where that is. The big green lines there, the Watchorn, the image that you saw that I showed on Landsat. The S up the top is the shore giant ring structure, which I've written papers on, or a paper on, and you can hopefully see that up there. Interesting thing is that the Watchorn giant ring structure and the shore giant ring structure, they actually overlap in the middle, which suggests that the Pilbara craton and the Yilgarn craton actually got a lithosphere underneath, continues right through. The other good thing about this enhancement system is that you can enlarge it and then enlarge it and then enlarge it until you can see right down to a local scale without having to fly new this or fly new that. You can basically, that's the 800 kilometre ring. Mount Magnet one side, Tropicana the other. Ring's a bit hard to see there, only half of it can be seen. The Mount Keith ring, that's about 350k diameter. And then you come down to the Leonora ring, that's about 90k in diameter. And this is the one that started it all that I actually had found. That's the Leonora ring on Landsat, and that's the same thing, 70 kilometres down. So they're actually, the structures actually appear to be vertical, which is a bit surprising, seeing craters are meant to bottom out very shallowly. I think you'll see soon that that's the very last thing that they do. That inset C, that's been enlarged 3,300% or 33 times, and it's still not in the slightest pixelated, so there should be a lot of room for extra enhancement to be done there. At this point you may be asking, how in the heck did you get this out of such unfocused images? Pretty much most of the images that geologists use are unfocused, and to my surprise most geologists don't seem to really get to grips with actually enhancing them. They leave it to the geophysicists or specialists. And the whole aim of this talk is to say you don't have to do that, you can do it yourself, and you can find yourself new ore bodies by doing so. You might laugh, but I use PowerPoint, extremely powerful. I used to use ER Mapper, which I thought was pretty good, and I got that first gravity image out 20 years ago, and everyone was very surprised that you could use gravity for detailed structure. In fact, a lot of geologists still don't use gravity for detailed structure. But PowerPoint, it works, and I'm very pragmatic. If it works, go for it. So the following images, they're back-engineered. A back-engineered image that I know well. A detailed description of these procedures on my website, and I'm pretty sure quite a few people are already using them. So this is the first one is often what that'd be a typical Landsat, say, from a distance, and then you use on PowerPoint you use picture functions, which is structural recognition, and you can iteratively use it, keep using it, and you start to bring out the structures. So you use it 3 or 4 or 5 times. If you try and do it all in one go, you just make a mess and you end up with just squiggles everywhere. And then you have wet look or plastic wrap slope enhancement algorithm, and then you can use high contrast, sharpen up the image. And you can, a mosaic, also in the same suite, is de facto horizontal or vertical derivative algorithm. Compresses the picture down, and then you higher contrast, sharpen the image again, and then you go back to your structural recognition program And then you just keep doing that. You might end up with doing it 30 times before you can get there. That's the picture on one of the pictures on the front of my website. I think that's me down near the vacuum rig. But I mean, that's actually what you can do. I guess different things like Photoshop, they've got similar type programs, but PowerPoint's the thing I use all the time. So I felt, I guess, when I pulled that first image out of the cratons all around Australia, out of that thing that Geoscience Australia had, a little bit like Galileo felt when he first viewed the moons of Jupiter. Eureka! Next section's on the genesis of the Yilgarn craton. You could fill this room with the tomes that have been written about the genesis of the Yilgarn craton, most of which I've read. And to do that, I've looked at tomography, as I said, in section and in plan. When did the craton form? A good geologist should always be asking the 4 W's: when, why, what, where, whenever they do any research. It gets you down to the fundamentals. So the current research suggests that the craton formed between 4 and 2.7 billion years, gigaatoms. My research suggests it was very much earlier, from the formation of the first crust, and basically finished at 3.8 gigaatoms when the heavy bombardment came and froze it, and it's nothing's happened to the Yilgarn craton since that time. Otherwise, those big circles would not be big circles anymore. They'd be ovoids and they'd be strung out everywhere. I've already described the freezing, I guess, of the lithosphere by these giant impacts. So as far as the impact reaches out, the shaking up of these huge impacts actually liquefies the rock, and there's heaps of evidence that it just liquefies, and in I think it's 5 minutes that the impact hits, the drops down 10 kilometres, the centre, and then it goes up 10 kilometres and then sprays out like a drop. There's a great one at the moment about the Chicxulub impact on circulating, and I actually sent it around, and it just totally liquefies the rocks, and a huge amount of fracturing, and then the heat is lost. Huge amount of heat's lost through magmatism and gas to the atmosphere. Same thing as when you spray a can, you spray off energy, the can gets cold in your hand. It's exactly what happened to the lithosphere. Took a fair while to come to the realisation that everywhere I looked on this 75 kilometre down, this is the Yilgarn now. Everywhere you look, there's circles, there's rings, parts of rings. So you can actually see the main. I guess this verifies that this enhancement system actually really works, because these structures, you can actually see them on the surface. They're really well documented. That's the main Walloona Norseman line, antiform, that the Goldal forms up. That's the Southern Cross one, goes up through Mount Magnet. There's other ones in there. There's big rings run around here. That's the part of the Barrambi ring structure. That's about 800 k in diameter. All those little arrows are pointing to, if you can see them, deformed earlier rings. That's one that's down near Ravensthorpe. In fact, it's very close to Ravensthorpe. might be why Ravensthorpe's there. These ones sit close to Norseman. That's the centre of the Barrambie ring, that is, and that's another one near Kew. And they look very similar both in size and number to the ones that are on the moon. And even on the moon you can see that it's not a structuralist thing. You've got big structures running through. So these big rings, there's nothing that could have formed those big rings after the late heavy bombardment, which was 4.2 to 3.8 gigarannums ago. So the morphology of these rings is effectively you've got a lot of earlier ones and quite a few deformed ones around the place that they would have formed before the major rings because once the major rings formed it actually froze the crust. And those major rings, as I've said, have not been deformed since. That's just a few of the major rings that you can see and that I've actually written papers on. This is where it gets really interesting because this is a cross-section through the Yilgarn. And my dear friends, you're seeing this for the very first time. And as this goes out around the world, this is the first time you've seen the Yilgarn as a structural entity. I use the same technique basically to get from that bland tomographic image, this one, then through the various steps to that and then to that. And at that point I was trying to enhance the various basins, I guess you would say, or arc lower hemispheres. But one thing is for sure is that it is a complete entity, so you can track structures right from one end right to the other end of it. And these particular ones here are the actual giant impact structures. You can actually see the centre of it there as a much more contorted zone, and then running around the bottom, about where the bottom of that is actually the base of it. And that's actually the Barrambie impact. Then I thought, well, that's all very well and good, but the gold probably didn't come up the impacts because it's too much of a tortuous path. So I enhanced it a little bit further and trying to pick out what I could see, these vertical structures that I could see in there running up through, because pretty sure that's the gold would come up vertical structures. The Ida fault and there and Burtville terrain boundary, and the main gold comes up that area, and you can see vertical structures. So enhanced it again, and there's just heaps and heaps of vertical structures through there, which I guess Earth being curved and the Earth is always moving and pushing up, it's a little bit like a Christmas cake that's fallen over something. Simple way of putting it, but effectively it doesn't matter how they got there, they're there, and that's what the gold's come up. That's the same section cut off at 75 kilometres depth. The O'Driscoll, named after my good mentor Tim O'Driscoll, not that you would have guessed, is that ring there, and that's that ring actually in the basement. Very clear bottom of a circle there. These rings over here, you've got the Proterozoic covering the Archean up here, and this big ring that appears to be showing on the surface. I'm pretty sure that's the same one down, 100k down. Did another section north-south through the Yilgarn. Same system. That's the original image. I looked at that and said, no way, not going to get anything out of that. But it doesn't seem to matter what is in the original image. The actual base data, all the pixels that tell you what structures are there must be there. I'm not a geophysicist, so I don't understand it, but all I know is I can operate the system. And so enhancing it again, I ended up with that. Thought, oh well, yeah, I wonder if it actually lines up with anything. And that's what I eventually laid out on the plan. And so the big knot that sits right in the middle there, so you can actually sort of, I've got a better one than this one later, I'll just quickly do it. That's the O'Driscoll. So this transverse section or north-south section goes right through the guts of the O'Driscoll impact, which is just west of Menzies. So the O'Driscoll impact and that big knot that's sitting underneath is, I'm positive that's the actual impact zone. The arc you can see going around in that direction is actually the uplift after the impact, and the big, those big arcs down the bottom there, the more sharper ones are actually from the O'Driscoll, and the big long ones are from the Watchorn impact, which is 100k away, so the centre doesn't show up. And that's, if you combine both of those sections, that's the O'Driscoll. So the circles continued pretty much right around, sort of independent evidence, confirmatory evidence in 3 dimensions effectively. Plan, east, west, north, south. This is the same thing with now looking basically west. So the central area is that's the O'Driscoll impact. You can see the centre sitting down there, little round bit sitting above, and then the outer, or it's actually a median ring sitting out there at about 200 kilometres diameter. That's 150k. So it goes down a long way, and there's the centre sitting right under it. That's the same ring that sits there, and that's in radiometrics on the surface. Like if you overlay that ring up in the inset over this plan, it sits exactly over the top. Once again, independent confirmatory evidence of the validity. Once again, you've got little rings and things everywhere around the place. Just looks like the moon's surface. This is cut off pretty much where the moon's surface would be, so I've sliced off all the crust. And then I did another section through, which is an oblique section, cutting through Mount Magnet, ending up in Cooktown, up that way. This sort of gives a bit more of an idea of the system of enhancement. Once again, I looked at that image and said, oh my goodness, don't think I'm going to get much out of this. Once again, I was totally surprised at what came out. Admittedly, in some of the earlier images, some of the lines are due to the things that have been put on, but once you enhance it more, they go off into the background and you get the true structure. And I'll show you that they are true structures once I can lay this one out on the plan. There's a large circle sitting in the middle of that. And down there, that one there is, so this is basically all using the structural enhancement, and that's the mosaic, which sort of takes a lot of the detail out but makes it easier to see things. So you can actually see structures dipping from the top left down to the bottom right, and then on the other side over here you can see one's in opposite dip. When you sit that on the plan, they all line up with structures on the ground. That's on your head, Mr. Squiggle's upside down job, but basically just to show where the thing sits. 75K is on the bottom side of that. One thing that you can see to a degree is the major Barrambi structure running around gets dispersed down in there, but that lines up, where it comes in lines up with that lighter area in there. Hard to see upside down. This data's from Simon's 1999, so it doesn't matter how old the data is, it still can be good. Geochronology, from now you can start to see the structures, and you can start to see in enough detail to see what one's overprinting relationships. You can start to work out the geochronology, or the time sequence of when things formed. So I've got a few givens: the age of the Hadean lithosphere, 4.5 to 4.1, which predates the giant rings; the age of the late heavy bombardment impacts, 4.1 to 3.8. That can be seen in the plans. And the known age of the crust at the surface from Neodymian dating, 3.8 to 2.7. The known age of the east-west structures, which are the last sort of major structures, 2.5 to 1.1 gigaatoms. That's just to summarise that. That's an interpreted cross-section laid out over the neodymium plan, just to show there's facts behind my presentation then. So you've got your crust, which is from all this dating, is 3.8 to 2.7. Late heavy bombardment, which are all these bowl-shaped structures, arcs. We know exactly when they happened, within 300 million years. And with Hadean lithosphere, which is all the contorted geology and out of shape rings, obviously predates these rings. And we won't dwell on this. So I don't think there's too many geologists here. But effectively that's the scheme. And the other thing, I've done a lot of work on shear systems and shear structures, right from microscopic work up to major ones, and this just falls straight into a Riedel shear system, which runs from south of Tasmania right through major system. So we do a quick underground tour from 150, so that was the 75 level, we're going to 150 to 300 kilometres, not metres, depth. So we've dropped down now another 75 kilometres, and the centre of action still appears to be through here, which probably not that apparent until you actually draw the rings from the previous lot of data, when a lot of flat Zs, or the more detailed structures, actually appear to be sitting almost radially. They come in from this end, but they seem to sit radially around. In the centre, they're radially around. Out on the edge, they're radially around. So whatever the structure is, it's still affected by the rings, but the rings aren't standing out anywhere near as well. So it's obviously a big shatter zone that's gone down there, but no hard and fast movement of the Earth. So that previous one was really just to look at the overall structure, but as we're in this game to find more gold and other minerals, I've did a enhancement that actually to show out the major structures, just like the same enhancement I did to get the structures out on the Landsat on the surface. And so the major structure that the gold goes up, which is the AusIMM Webinar line, it just stands out. That's the structure the gold's coming up, 150k down, still in exactly the same spot. Very interesting, of course, that Gruyere and Tropicana sit on a similar one that goes way up there. Look at all that area you can explore, all the way up there. In between, pretty exciting stuff. This is 225. Must have done something slightly different to the enhancement of this because the rings are showing out a little bit. Sort of in and around there, which is actually still the same centre of the Watchorn ring structure on the surface. Looks a little bit to be to the north. Interested to see how they migrate. That's Tim O'Driscoll's Shark Bay west-northwest lineament. People still rubbish Tim O'Driscoll, I just can't understand it. He was so far in front of his time. You've validated Tim, and that's the other half. And they're still roughly in the same position as they were on the surface. So they're probably 50k, they've gone to the north. They're the rings and the mineralisation again. This is straight off the 250 level that I just did the real broad enhancement of the ones that Geoscience Australia put out mid last year. That was that's the rings there. Further away you look at these things, the more ring-like they are. When you look at them up close, yeah, not so smart. And that's the mineralisation again. One thing that you can notice on every single plan where you've got the good mineralisation, it's always lying in the valleys. I'm not quite sure what the valleys are in tomography. I guess it just means an area of great change of the light areas. Theoretically, I think are areas of more the average rock velocity, and the dark areas I think are the areas where there's a faster velocity. Faster velocity generally means harder rock. So I'm sort of supposing that the dark areas are the areas where you get a lot of intrusives and perhaps cooler rock. But for sure it's answered the question of whether do east-west structures have anything to do with mineralisation? My word, they do. Kalgoorlie lies on the intersection of the AusIMM Webinar line, lies on the intersection of the east-west line. Leonora, Leavitt and Gruyere, they all lie on the big east-west structures. And these are big structures. That's not just a Proterozoic crack in the earth, it's actually a fundamental part of the original makeup of the earth prior to 4 billion years. Now we get down to the bottom level that I've looked at. There's another one at 400 kilometres, which as I was still putting this together at about 3 o'clock this afternoon, didn't think I had quite enough time. Interesting thing is that I don't sit down for days and days and days to get this. To get that would take me 10 minutes, quarter of an hour. I'm not boasting, that's about how long it takes to get that plan. And that's once you know the routine of actually how to do it. The interesting thing down here is that there's like you'd think you're starting to get to the melted zone. You're getting the dark brown rocks there. They're wet rocks. The grey are dry rocks, the cratons and lithosphere. So you're right on the boundary between at the bottom of the lithosphere, yet you've still got like really strong, well, they look like brittle structures running through. I'm just wondering, like, even though it's very, very hot and that down there, that the extra pressure is meaning that you still haven't gone over the divide into a mobile Earth. And the fact that the rings are still circular, although there's much fewer of them that are circular, means that there's not wholesale mobile Earth there. Oh, one thing was the sinistral offset on the left-handed towards your offset is right from the surface right down to the bottom level, so a flat Z. They're all over it, so you can actually work out the structure quite happily. So quick interp. There's still ring structures there, not terribly easy to see. There's been heaps of discussion about plumes and things like that, and whenever I see papers on plumes, they always have the plumes coming right up under the crust, which is about 60, 70 K down. Well, the maximum depth they've ever reached, if that is a plume there, is 300 K. These don't appear above that. However, this is a fantastic diagram in terms of targeting. So that's just the ring structures as you go down from the surface down to 300 K. For 250 K, effectively they're almost straight under each other, migrated across a bit. But on the very bottom one, it's shifted across about 60 K. My take on that is that that's got nothing to do with the original impact. It's actually does show that the crust is starting, that the bottom is actually shifting. And that, because I've done some work, quite a bit of work on the Superior Province or Superior Craton and the North China Craton, same sort of work as this. And both of those have been all wiped out in the bottom half. And this is the sort of thing that you get, the bottom, it gradually moves. Once again, it's sinistral movement, top to the left towards you, which is what it should be, as long as it's in that part of the world, if it was back then. So mineralisation targeting, which is what we're all about. This is, and I was a bit surprised, this particular diagram got rave reviews when Richard Blewett put it on LinkedIn, 6th of June, and I put up my lunar Australian diagram straight after that LinkedIn post, and they said of this diagram, amazing, amazing. And I put in my one, and I never got one comment. Well, you got to have a thick skin. So the mineralisation, just in where it sits, is actually so the yellow circles are where the actual rings sit on the surface, and that's where the mineralisation sits. So you can actually see the main concentration of gold and nickel mineralisations on the eastern side and the north and the eastern side of the major rings, and particularly where there's a huge number of rings intersect. Kalgoorlie, and I've only got about half of them there, is on the intersection of about 4 or 5 rings. There's a lot more rings that are up here where Agnew right through Moolart Well and all those places. Over here, so the top diagram up on the right is the Yamana system of rings, And that's Tropicana and so Tropicana there and Gruyere there, both 5 to 10 million ounce ore bodies, just been discovered. Well, Tropicana a bit earlier. I've got a bit more to say on that in a minute. They both sit on the rings and sit on multiple rings. There's actually about 6 or 7 rings, all gone bang, 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 just like they do on the moon, overprinting each other. This one here, that's the 2 brownish looking arcs that you see going around there, that's actually the Norseman ring, that's 800k in diameter. Kalgoorlie sits actually on the Cordon ring, which is sort of sitting there, which is centred just south of Southern Cross, but it also is sitting on the intersection of the Watchorn ring and the Norseman ring system. Northern ring system only really shows up in the radiometrics, and it's ovoid, so it might have been a slightly earlier one. It's overprinted by the others. And then Kalgoorlie and St Ives and Kambalda, they sit absolutely dead bang on these ring structures. Bit more than coincidence, I think. Just to show how well some of these rings show out, that's the Cordon ring in surficial geology. Like this is just from the top samples that have been taken. This is in Blewett's 2012 volume. With a bit of enhancement so you can see, but you could actually see, even in his volume, you could see this side of it as easy as anything. And I've actually gone many field trips all the way down that side of the ring looking at the granites. Good fun out in those granite trips, and every single time I came across one of the granites was on that ring structure there. It always had later, it was always not a gneiss, it was a later granite, and it always had intrusives in it, which suggests that the ring structures are active right through. So mineralisation targeting, surface radiometrics. I'm absolutely positive that the mineral content that we're now mining now actually came down with in the bolides, in the big, because they certainly didn't come from the Earth at that point, because Earth can't create these heavy minerals except in the core. Plate tectonics, absolutely certain, and a lot of people agree it probably didn't start till 2.6-ish million years ago, when the main gold system started really activating these, all the gold mines, the big Archean gold mines, all fall within 40 million years of each other, either side of 2.65 billion years. How is that so? You know, like it's got nothing to do with island arcs or any of the processes we know these days. It's got to have something to do with a worldwide event, and the only worldwide event that started around them was plate tectonics. Right, so colour of the radiometrics related to the ratio of potassium, which is red, uranium blue, thorium green. And I read up a bit about what minerals are related. Well, we know gold's related to potassium. Every gold mine you come across has got porphyries and all that. And lithium, may I dare mention, is also should be ranked with gold in terms of its radiometric. Onto targeting, a little bit before, little bit closer detail of the gold, how closely the gold mines follow the valleys, or which we would term the big major Zuleika shears and Ida faults and all the wonderful names we give them on the surface, but there's almost none of those, and they're all the more major gold mines that don't follow. So that big arc there, that big arc there is actually the arc of the Barrambi centre over here somewhere. No doubt that's an arc. This big arc here is the arc of the Cordon one, which centres over here. Kalgoorlie and all those follow. You also notice that the nor-nor'westers, wherever they intersect the nor-nor'westers, like at Kambalda, you get a blowout. Where they intersect the east-westers, you get a blowout. Nor-nor'westers, Gruyere is on a smaller one. And it might be due to the fact my hand was shaking a bit when I did this, but Tropicana doesn't quite sit on it, but it definitely all the way up that line there's, so I think there's actually north-south, and then there's the nor-nor'westers are very important for the gold mineralisation. Vertical structures, this is the north-south one. You can see the coming up there, and in the original, before I interpreted over it, there's big black lines running straight down. So effectively in the north-south there's very, very strong antiform. In fact, in the north-south sections, the antiforms, or the domes, are just much stronger than in the east-west. This is looking from the northwest down to the southeast. So that's the Kalgoorlie, the Norseman, Kalgoorlie, Wiluna, bang, straight into this huge, great big structure. There's absolutely no doubt that that's what it is. Even I couldn't have faked that. The Southern Cross, Golden Grove goes into another one. These other structures appear to line up with what would be the steep west dipping structures. Those structures coming up there, they line up with these flatter west dipping. And this is the main section I showed earlier with the gold, the vertical structures. I did a fair bit of work on, in fact, I haven't seen any geophysical interpretation of this Leonora line that's remotely like that. In fact, when I showed it to some geophysicists, they had a bit of a laugh. But, however, this vertical structure here lines up with the vertical system. There's actually a dark section, a dark area on that section that lines up with most of the mineralised zone. These fan-like structures, the X is actually there, that's south of Leonora. These other fan-like structures are under Laverton and Mount Morgans, and the fan-like structure over there is under Gruyere. Pretty conclusive evidence, not only of the structures but of the enhancement way I enhance stuff. So nitty-gritty of targeting, you've got to find out where the source of the mineral is, effectively, and then you track it to where it could be on the surface. So I went to the bottom level, and probably don't see it quite as well on this because it's I've drawn the lines on it, but in order to save a bit of time I've knocked the other slide out. But where all those light patches are, so that you run up there, Plutonic, Mount Magnet, Payne's Find, what is it, whatever the thing is south of Payne's Find, they all lie on these white lines, just off at Tropicana, on at Gruyere, on at Nova, and the bulk of those lines lies right on the boundary between the wet rocks and the dry rocks, which is going to be the very active zone. So we try and track those through to the surface. Well, before we do that, this is an example of like a really well documented example of, by myself of course, of the centre of a ring structure that's got down there all of the uranium mineralisation and vanadium mineralisation in the Yilgarn all falls within the central ring of the Barrambie structure. Sort of pretty much, I think, proof that the actual impact was generated the mineral, and that means that if you can go back down to the basement and see what the basement is like there. Is there anything special about that I can then find another one of those? Well, the first thing I can see, it's got a dark blob in it. So is there uranium in any of them, or vanadium? That's just the mental process, I guess. And the last one, which my eyes nearly fell out of my head once I started having a fiddle with the Yamana area. And I did send this to the guys that are all up there, so I don't know if they've pegged any ground on the basis of it, but effectively Yamana, Tropicana and Gruyere, they lie on these really bright pink radiometrics, which is red potassium, bit of blue in it, and so I went around and fiddled with the contrast and the colour until I could get as many of those as I could on the plan. I don't know if they're showing up there, but boy, they show up nice on the screen. So first place I would be looking, if I was looking for other Yamanas and other Tropicanas and Gruyères, would be, I'll be looking on the pods up that big structure that ran through there, and any other structure that runs through. So effectively these are examples of targets that they've been sitting there forever. I don't know if anyone's actually acted on them or not. So takeaway messages: scale. Don't get too caught up with the leaves of the tree. Have a look at the tree first. Data enhancement. You've got to have something that's cheap, that everybody can use, and you don't want it so specialised that only experts can use them. Definitely don't want any turf guardians saying you know the geologists can't do the work of geophysicists. You need first principles in your geology: how, why, where, when and where for your mineralising systems. You need out-of-box thinking, innovative, harebrained ideas. As I said before, you've got to have a thick skin. Be prepared to take it on the chin, and after 20 years, still there. And collaboration. Effectively, I can't do it all. Industry can't do it all. If nobody collaborates, we're going to run out of ore. And so happy hunting, everyone.